Thanks for tuning in to the Prime Bookseller Podcast, the bi-weekly podcast discussing all things Amazon bookselling.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Prime Bookselling Podcast. I'm Eric, and we are back. We actually have a question for this week, which I appreciate anybody that submits questions. We don't get them very often, but we do get questions here and there. And one of these questions, I think this is an interesting question, and I'm going to forewarn everything I'm going to tell you right now is purely based on not very much actual evidential research. Most of it is just my opinion. But the question is, do you wait to ship like 100 items versus like 20 items at a time? I guess I'm trying to figure out if the more I ship in multiple boxes, is it overall cheaper? So now I have never run data analysis to figure this out. I've never worried about this before, but I do believe I have a pretty good response to this, and I think that if anybody were to sit down and actually do the hardcore analysis to see if I'm right, they'd probably find that this is the way it works. So, the biggest question, so first of all, the question was not clear in this, but I assume by the way the question is written that this is talking about shipping items to Amazon. Because obviously it's very rare that if you're a merchant fulfilled seller, you should know this. It's not very common that you have somebody write 20 items or buy 20 items or 100 items at a time from you. Not to say that it's not possible. It just doesn't happen very often. So I'm assuming that this listener is actually inquiring about shipping in FBA items. And this is what I tell people with FBA items. So typically, my understanding of the way the fee structure, I'm using this knowledge base off of the fact that you're going to be using Amazon partner shipping, which if you're not at that point of using Amazon yet, but that you've never shipped in FBA items, basically what Amazon partner shipping means is that Amazon has a negotiated agreement with UPS to provide labels to people to ship this stuff in, and it's quite cheap. And the prices vary. I'm not going to go into the different prices because it really depends like where you're located and then where the items are going. So if it's farther away from you, it's going to be more expensive. It's going to be, if it's less than you, it's going to be cheaper. So that obviously you can see there's a big variance there in the fees that you could potentially pay on the shipping cost. But it is, compared to shipping anything else, believe me, it's relatively cheap. So the question is should you wait until you have 100 items to ship in, or should you ship in, is it okay to ship in 20 items at a time? And I think the best way I would give an answer to this question is just based on it's not about the number of items you're sending in, but it's about the boxes. So basically how I would explain this is that if you are going to ship one item to Amazon in one box to sell, you are going to get hosed on shipping fees. Okay? So, because generally, basically what's going to happen, let's just say you only have one book and you're sending it in. Well, that book is probably going to cost you between $5 and $6 to get to the Amazon warehouse. And that's just simply because the way I would explain it, and I don't know if this is the way their fee structure is set up, but I assume it is that UPS has a flat rate for a box. So if you ship in one box, one item, the lowest they're going to go on that is, let's just say $6. So you're going to pay $6 for that. And whether or not you have a box of 10 pounds, let's just say a box of 10 pounds is $6. Whether you have one item in there or 15 items in there, it's going to cost the same because it's a light enough box that they're going to charge you basically, there's a fee per box. So basically what happens is the bigger the shipments you make, the cheaper the shipping should be. But with that said, if you ship in something that has 12 boxes, or just has 1 boxes, I would tell you that the fee should be very similar. It probably will alter if you really ran the test, a little bit from box to box, but as long as you can, like a normal box can get 15 books, 15, 20 books, depending on the size of the books, you can get into 1 box. If you can do that, I would just send in. You'll see that the rates are cheap enough on 1 box that it's okay to just send it in 1 box at a time. But do you probably save a little bit more money the more you get into a shipment? Yes. So basically the moral of this story is to try and get your shipments as big as you possibly can. But as long as you're filling up a full box, I wouldn't hesitate to send it in, because, and especially in the situation of most of you are going to have your account. I don't know that if we talked about this on this podcast yet, but Amazon recently put in this thing where now you have 3 different tiers of FBA inventory coming in. I think they call it restock fees or something, like placement fees, I think is what they call it. And basically the highest tier is the most expensive. You pay on every item that comes into the warehouse, but they send it to the fewest warehouses. And then you can go all the way down to the third one, which has no fees associated, but they send it to a ton of different warehouses. I generally tell Amazon booksellers, pick the middle tier. You're going to pay fees. It sucks, I know, but it is way more it's probably more cost effective than having them send 3 books to 13 different warehouses around the country. And that's literally what happens. You build a shipment of 200 books, 187 of them will go to 1 warehouse, and then they'll break them off into 3s and send 3 to 2 different warehouses around the country. And it's goofy. So because of these fees and the way they break it up, you might have stuff that you're sending in partial boxes. It's just going to happen. And with those, I typically tell people you just got to suck it up and send them in. Kind of look at it as, that shipment that had 187 items in it is going to offset the cost of the fact that you're getting screwed on shipping in those 3 items. But the point is you do want to try and get your shipments up as big as possible, because I do feel like that is going to slow down that is going to reduce the shipping costs slightly. But I would not tell you that you need to wait until you have 100 books before you ship it in. As long as you have a full book, get it in there, because it's probably better for you to get it in there and get those books selling than to wait until you have 100 and then leave books sitting around for months that aren't selling while you're waiting to get 100. So my advice in this situation is to make sure you're at least filling up a full box in almost all situations. Again, like we talked about with the inbound placement fees and stuff like that and the Amazon shipment splits, there's going to be times where Amazon is going to quote screw you, because they're going to tell you that you have to send 3 books to California when you're in New York. Just why they need those 3 books in California, we don't know, but that's just what Amazon does. So, but try to keep them as big as you can. But I would tell you that as long as you can fill a box, you're fine. The other part of this too is in this, I don't know if this is a huge effect on things. I think it still is, because I think their algorithm still works weird with this, is we typically try to keep our batches under 200 bucks. And the reason for that is because you start getting weird stuff after 200 items. I've seen 200 items where Amazon will then take, and they'll basically split the 1 shipment into 2 shipments. So let's just say you have 200 books. They say, we're going to send 180 of these to the warehouse RDW. That's just the code they use for warehouses. So we're going to send it to RDW. I don't even know if that's a warehouse code. I completely made that up. But we're going to send 180 items to RDW or whatever I said. And then, but let's just say you had 250 total items. So of the 200 items, they might send 180 to RDW. Then what they're going to do is they're going to look at the other 50 and they're going to say, well, those should go to RDW too. But we don't want to put them in that shipment. So we're going to create a second RDW shipment. So now notice this, that they're breaking it apart into two shipments, but it's going to the exact same place. And you will see this all the time. And the reason why I try to avoid that is just because, I'm not too worried about it if it's 50 items, because whatever, it costs a little bit more to ship because it's not all grouped together, because I do believe that there's a discount if, all of the labels are put under one grouping, basically. That's kind of hard to explain better than that. But as long as there's 50 books going, that's fine. But let's just say you did like 203 items and they sent 200 to the one RDW shipment, and then they created a second RDW shipment that was 3 items. That's really stupid. So again, we just try to keep our batches under 200 items to try and alleviate that, because from what I have seen, it seems like at around 200 items, Amazon starts going crazy and doing weird stuff like that. Typically, we will go over 200 items a little bit because we typically know that the way we have our accounts set up is that these items, not all 200 of them are going to go to one shipment. Probably 150 of them are going to go to one big warehouse, and then the other ones are going to get split off into smaller warehouses. So, but short end of this whole episode to answer this question is that I would try to make your batches as big as possible, but as long as you can fill one box, it's okay to send that box in. I think the cost of shipping is going to be minimal to you, that increase over making them bigger, that it's probably better to just get the items in there and get them up for sale. Try to keep your batches under 200 items, or play around with it. Use a number that makes sense to you. It could be like 225 items, because just remember, unless you have yourself set at that top tier, they are not going to split. They're more than likely going to split any batch you create into multiple shipments. So if you have 200 items, you're not going to have one single shipment that's over 200 items, because they're going to split it into multiple shipments. But the key to this is that you want to keep every single shipment under 200 items, so they're not doing the thing where they split the same warehouse into 2 different shipments, if that makes sense. Hopefully it does. I know that's a little confusing, but maybe once you start creating, if you're confused, create shipments once, and I think what I'm talking about will make a lot more sense. And as always, if it doesn't make sense, we have this beautiful email address. sales@kingsridgemedia.com, where you can send me an email, and I'm happy to clarify anything for you. So I'm going to wrap that up with this question. Again, we do have those sourcing opportunities. So if you are looking for more books for your business, or you're just looking to dabble your toes into a new method of sourcing, check out our links in the show notes, or jump over to Kings Ridge Media. Check those out. I'll say the email address again. You can email me with any questions, concerns, anything like that at sales@kingsridgemedia.com. And we will be back next week with another podcast. And I want to thank everybody for their continued support, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thanks for listening to the Prime Bookseller Podcast. Join us for the next episode as we discuss all things Amazon bookselling.